The silence of the Olympic Peninsula isn't actually silent, but that night the forest held its breath in a way that made my pulse thud against my eardrums like a rhythmic warning. I had hiked 6 miles into the Ho rainforest, seeking the kind of isolation that heals a bruised soul. But as the embers of my campfire died down to a dull, angry orange, I realized that the isolation was a lie. Something was standing just beyond the reach of my headlamp's beam, not breathing, not moving, just waiting for the exact moment I decided I was safe. The humidity felt like a wet wool blanket draped over my shoulders as I zipped the tent flap shut. I told myself the snapping twig I'd heard moments ago was just a black bear or a stray elk moving through the ferns. That's the lie we tell ourselves in the backcountry. We pretend the woods belong to the animals because the alternative is too much to stomach. I crawled into my sleeping bag, the nylon fabric crinkling loudly in the stagnant air. Every time I shifted, the sound seemed to echo, announcing my exact position to whatever was lurking in the cathedral of moss-covered Sitka spruces outside. I tried to slow my breathing, focusing on the distant rhythmic rush of the Ho River, but the water sounded different tonight. It sounded like voices whispering just below the threshold of hearing. I must have drifted into a thin, restless sleep because I woke up to the sensation of weight. It wasn't a physical weight on my body, but a change in the air pressure inside the tent, as if someone had pressed their palm against the rainfly. I laid perfectly still, my eyes wide and straining against the dark. Then came the sound. It wasn't a growl or a huff. It was a soft, wet, sliding noise, like a piece of raw meat being dragged over a silk sheet. It started at the base of the tent and moved upward, slowly trailing along the slope of the fabric right above my head. I could see the silhouette of a long, spindly finger, or something that mimicked a finger, pressing into the nylon, creating a deep indentation that moved with agonizing deliberation toward the peak of the tent. My heart wasn't just beating, it was trying to escape my chest. I reached out, my fingers trembling as they brushed the cold metal of the bear spray canister I'd left by my pillow. The indentation stopped. The forest outside was deathly quiet. Even the crickets had gone mute, as if they were afraid of being noticed. Then came a voice from the other side of the thin polyester wall. It didn't sound human, not really. It sounded like a recording played at the wrong speed, a raspy, distorted imitation of a woman's laugh. It was short, clipped, and ended in a wet gargle. My blood turned to ice. I knew that laugh. It sounded exactly like my sister, but my sister was 300 miles away in Seattle. I didn't move for what felt like hours. The moon must have come out from behind the clouds, because a pale, sickly light began to filter through the trees, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls of my tent. That's when I saw the second shadow. It wasn't touching the tent. It was standing about 5 feet away, a tall, impossibly thin shape that looked like a peeled tree trunk with too many joints. It didn't have a head that I could discern, just a tapering neck that disappeared into the canopy. I watched as the shadow leaned down, its movements jerky and mechanical, until its face, or where a face should be, was inches away from the mesh window of my rainfly. The smell hit me then. It was the scent of old pond water and copper, a metallic rot that made my stomach turn. I gripped the bear spray so hard my knuckles popped. I knew if I stayed in the tent, I was a trapped animal. If I ran, I was prey. The thing outside began to circle, its footsteps heavy and rhythmic, crunching through the down needles with no attempt at stealth. Each step sounded like a mallet hitting the earth. It started to hum. It was a low, vibrating drone that I felt in my teeth. The melody was familiar, a twisted version of a lullaby I hadn't heard since I was a child.
Took a deep breath, my lungs burning with the humid air, and I made a choice. I grabbed my tactical flashlight and the spray, and in one fluid motion I ripped the zipper down and lunged outward. I expected to see a monster, a beast of legend, but the beam of my light hit nothing but the silver bark of the trees and the thick, hanging curtains of club moss. The clearing was empty. My campfire was a pile of gray ash. I spun in a circle, the light dancing over the ferns, searching for that spindly shadow. There was nothing, just the wind finally picking up, rattling the leaves of the big leaf maples. I didn't let my guard down. I backed up toward the nearest tree, keeping my spine against the rough bark. I scanned the darkness, the light cutting through the mist that was now rolling in from the river. Then I looked down. In the soft mud directly in front of my tent, right where I had been sleeping, were footprints. They weren't animal tracks, they were human, but the toes were far too long and the stride was nearly 6 feet apart. The tracks didn't come from the woods, they started right at the tent door, as if the thing had simply materialized there. I heard the laugh again, but this time it was coming from directly above me. I didn't look up. I couldn't. I just ran. I didn't grab my pack or my boots. I ran in my socks, crashing through the underbrush, the thorns tearing at my skin and the sharp rocks cutting into my feet. I didn't follow the trail. I just ran toward the sound of the river, hoping the water would mask my scent or my noise. Behind me, I could hear the crashing of something large and heavy keeping pace. It wasn't running. It was leaping, the sound of its landings rhythmic and heavy, like a giant skipping through the timber. The river appeared through the fog like a shimmering gray ribbon. I plunged into the icy water, the cold shocking my system and bringing a momentary clarity. The current was strong, pulling at my waist, but I fought through it, reaching a gravel bar in the middle of the channel. I turned and shone my light back at the bank I just left. The beam hit the edge of the tree line. There, standing at the very brink of the water, were 3 of them. They were pale, their skin the color of a drowned fish, with limbs that seemed to have too many elbows. They didn't have eyes, just dark, weeping pits, and their mouths were wide, toothless holes that vibrated with that low, humming drone. They didn't try to cross the water. They stood in a perfect row, swaying in unison with the wind. One of them raised a long, shivering hand and pointed directly at me. Its mouth opened, and it spoke my name. It wasn't a shout. It was a whisper that felt like it was being spoken directly into my inner ear, bypassing the air entirely. I stayed in that river until the sun began to bleed through the clouds in the east. When the first light touched the moss, the figures simply faded, retreating into the shadows of the giant trees, as if they were nothing more than a trick of the light. But the scratches on my arms were real, and the tracks in the mud remained. I hiked out the remaining miles in a daze, my feet bleeding and my mind fractured. I didn't stop at the ranger station. I didn't tell anyone. I just got in my car and drove until the trees were replaced by the concrete and neon of the city. But even now in my apartment on the 4th floor, I don't keep the windows open. Sometimes, when the city gets quiet at 3 in the morning, I can hear a soft, wet, sliding sound against the glass, and I know that the forest doesn't let go of what it's claimed. I realized that night that we are never truly alone in the wild. We are just guests who have overstayed our welcome. The woods are deeper than we know, and some secrets are meant to stay buried in the moss and the mist. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark heart of the National Forest, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the
channel for more true horror stories that will keep you looking over your shoulder. Turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying update, and drop a comment below sharing your own unexplained encounters in the wilderness. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, if you hear your name whispered in the trees, don't look up.